Hello and welcome to the Career Success Podcast. I'm Jason Connolly. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. But if this is your first time, thanks for joining us. In this series, every week we talk to the biggest names in business, but also up and coming and emerging business talent. We will understand what key business leaders have done in order to rise to the top. We will also talk about success habits and what they do in order to ensure they stay at the top of their game. Listen and find out hints and tips to help you in the world of business. How do you set up your own business and make sure it's a success? Also, how to drive business growth and get your company noticed. Myself and my guests will offer practical advice to help you in your career from those who have made it. We will talk about the challenges, adversity, and the mountains they've had to climb in order to reach career success. In this episode, I'm joined by James Knight, CEO of Keystone Law. Keystone has grown from a startup to a leading law firm of its kind. Today, they are a full service AIM listed firm with over 350 lawyers, averaging 22 years PQE gained at some of the country's best law firms. They've got 45 support staff and thousands of clients. They've also won countless awards and considered to be a significant force within the legal sector. Now, James, who's joining us, qualified as a solicitor in 1992 with city law firm Trower and Hamlins. He practiced as a commercial lawyer in Oman, Dubai, and Hong Kong before returning to England in 1999. In 2000, James started his own legal consultancy, helping small to medium-sized companies receive a level of service and value that was unobtainable through conventional law firms. Exponential growth and strong demand for this type of service led to James to establish Keystone Law in 2002. James now focuses on Keystone's day-to-day operations as well as the firm's strategic direction and growth. James, thank you for joining me.
Not at all. Thank you for asking me on the show.
Thank you. So, Keystone Law, I know who you are, but for those who don't know you, give us a bit of an overview of what Keystone are. They're not like a conventional law firm, and we get lots of people who are listening to this show who aren't even lawyers. Give us an explanation on what Keystone are.
I think, Keystone is a law firm. It provides a conventional law firm service to its many thousands of clients, but it's a different animal. It's a different beast. It's got a different DNA. It's got a different personality. The lawyers work from their own office environment, wherever that may be, maybe at home, maybe in some other commercial premises. And they get we work on a performance-based remuneration structure, which is a fancy way of saying that people get a percentage of billings, and a high percentage, about 75%. But the factors, those are the nuts and bolts of what it's about. What's interesting about Keystone is by removing office politics, by removing management meetings, and by supporting lawyers rather than driving them with billing targets, by giving them the freedom and the flexibility and the autonomy to work with clients in the way that suits the clients, you end up with a situation which is a very different, a very happy place. You end up with delivering a very good service, but really it's also what we sought to achieve and have really achieved is creating something that is not just for delivering great service to clients, but also actually being a very happy, comfortable place, a place that has got a very positive energy to it.
It's interesting what you're saying. Obviously, a lot of people now are working from home. Seems to be the new normal. We're in a pandemic. We're still going through it at the moment. How can you support people that aren't in the office? It sounds like the two don't go hand in hand.
Well, I suppose what we did is we spent 20 years building it, and which helped. So it wasn't exactly perfect right from the start, but over 20 years we've developed IT infrastructure. And then also we call it long corridors. We compromise for those long corridors by lots of drinks, parties, dinners, training events. And because you've got a flat structure, i.e., you don't have different titles, everyone has the same position, people are working together, collaborating, you end up with a very, let's say, an event and a party is great fun and very conducive to people establishing relationships. So you end up with 400 people knowing each other much, much better than they'd know their colleagues in a previous conventional firm where everybody would sit in the same building not talking to each other. So it's a very different animal.
It's really interesting you say that because I would assume that I would know my colleagues better from being in a room with them. What do you think the key to? There's lots of people out there who've got businesses, they're running businesses, they're struggling to manage people through whatever it is, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, whatever. But what do you think the key to managing people remotely is? Because you're a seasoned hand at this.
Well, yes. I mean, we have a certain advantages when you work on a sort of, let's say, our lawyers are technically self-employed. They're unpaid when paid. That it's to a certain degree an organization like that, and this is a developing business concept, the umbrella concept. Um, is self-policing to a degree, but we build in incentives. So we don't build in, let's say, it's all about carrot and not about stick. It's an opt-in culture. This one, it may not work for all businesses, but for this type of business, it works beautifully, and it can work in professional services. I would have thought across the board, but I'm not an expert in all areas of other professional services. But the concept, the biggest in the UK is St James's Place Wealth Management Company. It's got thousands of people. And again, they work under the umbrella with all of the support, the infrastructure, the insurance of the lead brand. They do work in the name of the brand. So if you want to give today's workforce flexibility in professional services, then this can be a very, very good way of doing it and maintaining control over the um, remote and dispersed working people. And yes, but you know, it's accompanied by manuals, guidance, and you know, you'd still have to have rules and etc. because it has to be properly managed and policed.
So what I take from that is infrastructure is absolutely key in managing this operation. I've never heard of the term carrot without stick. Is there no stick at all? So they're getting the carrot straight away?
There has to be, you know, we're a law firm. We have to provide. We need to. We provide you know, high level of service. There are many rules and regulations. The legal profession is highly regulated. You know, there are some things that are not negotiable. Following the regulations and the rules, providing a professional, fantastic service. Other things are very opt-in. How much work one wants to do, when one wants to take, what hours one wants to work, what place one wants to work, and so it's yeah, it has to have a balance.
But this is a it's a very modern way of working. To people that aren't familiar with Keystone the law, this is a modern way of working for the legal sector. Yes, other sectors have been doing things like this for decades before, but this is an innovative way of working. People
Well,
being
yes,
self-employed and so on.
technology, like a lot of things nowadays, technology is the backbone.
Okay, so um, we'll talk about Keystone a little bit more, but tell us about this journey. Then you were a practicing solicitor. How did you get from practicing law to being a consultant to opening to having one of the biggest law firms in the country? That's a mighty big career.
As you said in the start, so the law has always been sort of provided quite a lot of variety to me in many ways. But I suppose I've worked hard to give that variety, from working in Oman, Dubai, and then just going out to Hong Kong in very interesting times of 1992, whilst it was still part of the British Empire before it got transferred across to in 97 to China. And so they were very, very interesting years there and great, great fun. But in 1999, the Asia had crashed. Hong Kong had slightly lost its um, glimmer, or it was just not quite such a great place to be. And so I came back to the UK and I worked as a consultant for various organizations here and there. But I mean, I suppose I was really looking for an organization like Keystone to work with. I could not find it. And so I suppose, like a lot of businesses are created this way. Somebody looks for the service, can't find it, so they decide to make it themselves, and that's exactly what I did.
So the idea for Keystone very much came from you looking for a firm like Keystone, and then there was nothing else on the market.
Absolutely, 100%. I just thought I couldn't be the only one.
Right. Okay. What's really interesting? You've floated on the stock market. I can't remember when was that, James. That was
In
in
November 2017.
right. Okay. What's it like to float a company on the stock market? What was that transition like? Was
I
there
mean,
a lot of pain?
it's actually quite. I can't really say that it's great fun, but it's actually quite exciting. And and
What was
and
exciting about it?
well, I'll tell you. I mean, it's first of all, there's a lot of work for a lot of advisors. It's expensive. It costs about £1 million. My CFO, fortunately, was up to the job and worked extremely hard. Um, there was one part that is excruciatingly hard work, which is 2 weeks of what they call the road show, where you actually go around and sell to about 7 hours a day, seven different meetings, seven different locations for 2 weeks. Sell, sell, sell,
7 hours of
and in
selling, James.
between
That doesn't sound like a full day in recruitment, though.
that is yeah, exactly. Yes, but it is, but then it is so exciting because then if you get through it, and you manage, as they say, get it away. In other words, you get people go, I think that's a good idea. I want some of those shares. Then you only know whether you're on just a few days before it happens. And I suppose you have to be prepared to walk away and to just and for it to not happen if it's just if it's just not flowing. But it and then when you open up the stock market, if you're lucky enough to be given the opportunity, you push the button, the stock market starts up, your name appears, the market's open, the Keystone's name is there, and you see the shares starting trading, and it's very surreal. um, I put my mother to it. She loved it.
Oh, fantastic! So you obviously, you're a company now that is listed. You hear a lot out there that when a company goes onto the stock market, it kind of changes. It's a different dynamic. It's a different beast. You're answerable to shareholders. That in
Yes,
turn
yeah.
changes the culture of the company. How's that impacted on Keystone? Has
I
it
mean,
been positive?
it's a very good point. I mean, the conventional wisdom is you cannot be on the stock market and an entrepreneurial organization. The two are counterintuitive. They can't exist. Well, I don't agree, and I've got sort of 3 years of experience of not agreeing. We have every bit the same sort of entrepreneurial nature because we are a law firm and an entrepreneurial organization, which is, again, that's almost like a slight dichotomy. But it can exist. We make very quick, good business decisions without endless committee meetings, but we do so well, and we consider the risks, etc., but we just consider them quickly. And um and and the ethos and the personality of the business has remained exactly the same as it was before. Yes, it has grown a lot, but you can still, as long as you're mindful that with growth comes new challenges where you need to keep the personality and the ethos and the communication and the fun, then it can be exactly the same as a pure owner managed business.
What do you enjoy most about your role at Keystone now?
I think I like. That's a very good question. I mean, normally, COVID aside, one of the greatest
Well,
things
always
is
COVID
of,
aside at the moment. So
yes, is of course the social element, which is, as we mentioned earlier, is one of the very important parts of retaining cohesion within the business. Yes, sure, we compensate like everybody else is with telephone and Zoom and Teams, etc., etc. But it's not quite the same. But then this is not a situation that's going to go on forever. I quite like the public company side and sort of seeing the investors, presenting. But generally, I like making decisions. And I think that in business, one of the most important things is to be able to make reasonably good decisions. You can't get it right every time, but at least to have an intuition that you feel comfortable making a quick, reasonably good decision, and that's something that I've always found that I've been quite strong at.
What would you say to someone who's maybe thinking, right, okay, I want to work for one of these types of modelled law firms, but I'm not sure that they're answerable to shareholders. What would you say to someone to rebut that?
Well, everyone's answerable to somebody.
Well, very true. Okay, and in terms of sort of challenges along the way, what's been some of the toughest challenges you've had to make on this journey? Because I imagine there's been some really tough decisions. You've been through a multitude of challenges to get the law firm to where it is now. What's really kind of stood out
I
to you
tell
as
you
being
what, Jason, the first 3 years were the toughest. You've got your quite apart from financially, it's tough. You've got nothing really coming in, or if there is, it's not coming into your own pocket. But also, when you try and do something that is manifestly different in a profession that hasn't really changed in about 400 years, then you are met with a quite a lot of detractors, quite a lot of criticism, quite a lot of naysayers. And one of the greatest challenges is especially when you're not you're doing something that there's no path to follow. You've got nobody, you've got no template to go by, and obviously it's very important to retain your confidence when all about you are telling you that you haven't got a hope in hell. But at the same time, you there's not everybody. You've got some people that are positive, and you just draw on that. But you have to be selective,
did
and
you
that's
have
a
people?
that's a challenge.
Did you have people in those early days? You were going out pitching for business. You're different. Oh, we're scared of change. You're a law firm that isn't like others. Was that kind of one of the
Yeah,
the hurdles you
it
came
was
up against?
endlessly.
What was your answer to that then? Was it this vision was so strong and you were out there in
Yes,
sales
I
mode,
mean
or
that's
how?
the thing is, I mean, really to be successful in business, or certainly a business that is quite difficult to get going, you've got to have this ridiculously myopic passion, which is unassailable, and which sometimes brings people around. And
Okay.
it's about selling most of the time. It's in fact almost all of the time it's about selling
So it was that
when you're
passion
at
that
the
drove.
start.
So go on, go on.
Yeah, at the start, that's what it is. And yes, that's the passion that drives one. And where the passion comes from is whoever is difficult to say. I mean, and sometimes you don't even know you have it until you are put in a position where you need it.
Well, I suppose that's the same as many lawyers joining the firm, but you've got a room full of entrepreneurial lawyers, and yeah, to someone that's new to the law, you wouldn't necessarily associate lawyers and salespeople even in the same kind of thought process, would you?
Yes, I mean, well, I mean, it's very important for lawyers to be. They have to be salespeople or good lawyers. They have to bring in the work, and they often bring in the work on the force of their personality and legal skills. Just being a great lawyer is not really enough to build up relationships with companies. People like to do business with like-minded souls, and a lot of businessmen are quite outgoing, and because they need to be. The entrepreneur is generally not shy of a word or two, and they often like to deal with lawyers that they can have a beer with.
Yep. Well, I think lawyers are becoming more and more, part of a business, not just for legal, but for advice, for kind of even strategic decision making. Who's inspired you? Who sort of inspired you in those early days and continues to inspire you?
In business wise,
Yeah, yeah,
I've
in
never
business.
yeah I've never really sort of. I mean, I've read a lot of business books, and I find I find the stories from Richard Branson onwards, etc. Interesting. I don't know. I think that inspiration to do business, I don't know if it's an inspiration or it's just a passion and a pleasure. It's something that's enjoyable, and it's just part of your makeup as to whether you find something enjoyable or not.
Okay. What business books would you recommend? Have you read a particular title that you think you want to shout from the rooftops about?
I used to read these sort of books like Who Moved My Cheese or whatever it was called. That was years ago.
I've never heard
Um,
of that one.
No, it's like, oh, it's all about adapting and things like that. And then, of course, suddenly then I realized after a while that these business books are all written by people who have never done anything in business themselves. So then I prefer to read the true story business books, like by people who have started Twitter
Right.
and
Actually done something noteworthy.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a good story. Often it's not quite as glamorous as you like to think it is. Obviously, Branson is the one who's done very well on his writing.
I used to work for his company,
Is
Virgin
that right?
Atlantic. Yeah, great.
Yeah,
Had a great time there, and I think
I'm
one of
sure.
the lessons I learned from there is you treat people right, and that
Mm.
that they want to work for you. Is there anything that you've decisions that you've made that perhaps now, on reflection, you might have done differently?
Well, we've been quite lucky. I've never really made anything drastically bad decisions. One of the things we did have to rebrand in 2008 because we started off with a in 2002 with a name of a of the firm, which I think at the time was okay, but it was lawyers direct, and it was as we you never know where a business which direction it's going to go, and is it as we developed, we started to go into a more and more sophisticated area, and I mean I could never have imagined that we would be working for the being able to attract the people we attract and the clients that we now have at the start. And so we did have to rebrand in 2008 to Keystone Law, and that was just an essential decision. So yeah, in hindsight, I would have started with a different name, but then hindsight, 2020 hindsight is a
And
wonderful
where
thing.
did the name Keystone come from?
It's it doesn't come from it is something that okay, I'll tell you what it is. It is a name that is not it does not sound like a normal law firm, and yet is not incompatible with a commercial law firm. I always wanted to have some this stone in it. I don't know, quite a hard name. The keystone, of course, in the bridge, as you probably know, is that central stone that holds two parts of the bridge, holds the thing up. So there was a symbolism for me, as well as
Right. Okay.
so there seemed to be a soul to it, some purpose, some reason. We haven't really flogged it to death, that concept of the stone, in terms of how we present ourselves.
But it
Um,
sounds like it was something that was marketable in your mind as well.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that. It just felt right.
What would you say then to lawyers starting today? They may be thinking about going into a career in law, or they may be at that stage where they're undergoing a training contract. What advice would you give to a lawyer that's starting out in the early parts of their career now?
Well, the legal world is actually a lot tougher than it used to be. I mean, it used to be always
Why do you
synonymous.
think that is?
Well, it's more commoditized now. It's not as respected. You go back, I don't know, 40 years or something like that, and the lawyer and the doctor and the accountant were always sort of nice bit of golf and plenty of money, that sort of thing. And it's not and this was before the bankers and the brokers and the sort of recruitment consultants and and it was a lot easier time since then. And the world has changed. The lawyers are not really. It's an incredibly hard place, and not actually very well paid. Except yes, the top London city firms, they still pay very well. and to say that they require their pound of flesh is an understatement. And you know, it's again, as I mentioned before, if you have the passion for it, then that's most important. And also to choose, to choose. There are many different law firms out there, as you well know, that have different personalities that suit different types of people. So it's really actually quite important to talk to people who know and to get themselves placed into a firm that has the personality that makes it a home for them, because they're going to spend plenty of time in it.
You mentioned about it becoming kind of more kind of consumer based, it becoming more competitive. Do you think that's a good thing to the end consumer?
Um, it certainly has, in real terms, have brought legal costs down. Again, I'm sort of not talking about the large magic circle, big city firms. Um, whether I mean, the law is a big subject because you've got legal aid, access to justice, etc. It's we operate in one particular area of that, and that area has become much more commoditized and much more competitive and less fun. So maybe it's better for the consumer, not necessarily better for the lawyers, but then that's gave us the opportunity, and that's why Keystone has been successful.
And to bring it back to the advice we're giving, obviously it's difficult. It's not easy. We know law's hard now. We know there's more competition than ever. There's people qualifying out there. There is more people than there are jobs out there for trainee solicitors.
That's the
It's
problem.
extremely competitive.
Yes.
But if you was going to give someone one bit of advice, they want to go into law. They've researched it well. What would that advice be?
Um, make sure you work hard.
It's as simple as that. Right, okay. And to ask then, so you've had a successful business. Let's bring this back to business then. We've got someone there that's maybe thinking, right, I want to go out and start a business. Sometimes during times of great adversity and struggles, there can come great success stories, even through things like COVID. I've heard success stories of where people have opened businesses.
Sure.
What advice would you give to someone maybe thinking about starting a business that it might even be in the legal space? I don't know. What would
Mm.
James Knight say to that person?
Well, you've got to see, obviously you've got to persevere. You've got to have a passion for it. But then also, I think that's one when everyone says you've got to keep on going, keep on going. One of the things very important to remember is that if you're just banging your head against a closed door, you might need to think again and to actually go, right, well, everyone tells me I have to keep going, but you do, but you really have to also feel the feedback, and then if it's not working in one place, almost like feel around like a man in the dark, because somewhere along the line there is an you're probably on the right path. It just needs a tweak here and there, a little bit of a different angle. When when I started out in doing this current business, it turned out a very, very different animal, and we had to just see, when you get a success, go right, okay, focus on what made that successful, that particular, why did that make it work when everything else hasn't, and then throw your energies into that.
So it's kind of looking for the thing that maybe shines out, that feels right, following that feeling, following that
Absolutely,
gut
and no
feeling. Right.
matter how right you are, if you're trying to swim upriver when everything, all the energy, the people, the fashion, if you like, the popularity is going in the other direction, um, you're you're not going to get there.
So you've
You,
got to kind of feel the market, feel which
y-
direction that.
yeah, you can't swim upriver all the time. But it's very difficult giving that sort of advice, because also, you do have to keep plowing on. When I mean, in the first 3 years, it feels like you're pulling a steamroller uphill. So, but at least you are getting uphill. If you're just getting nowhere, then you've got to think again.
Right. Okay. Fine. What sort of in the legal world then? What there's a lot of. It's obviously difficult to get to partnership. It's very, very, very extremely hard, and a lot of people, the partner boat does sort of pass them by. But What advice would you give to someone that wants to be a partner sort of early on in their PQE? What do you think they should do? What's the quickest James Knight advice you can give for someone to get to partnership?
Yeah, well, there's it's not just about the hours, isn't it? It's about the whole package. It's about being popular. I mean, isn't that the always the case?
Do you think partnership is quite driven by popularity? I guess in any setting, do you think it comes more down to an individual's face fitting and them being a good person that goes out to social drinks, or do you think it's
It's
what do you think a partnership driver is?
well, it's always everything is got some elements of popularity to it in terms of every every promotion, every success. But I mean, not nearly as much as it used to be. I would think because now money is such a driving factor. But it's the number one thing for success in a law firm as an employed person or for partnership is to bring in work because it's there are plenty of people that can do the work. It's not so easy to bring it in.
Do you think there's obviously a lot of talk about things in the legal sector like diversity, this, that, and the other. Do you still think the legal sector has a long way to go, or do you think it's there?
I think that the culture, business, um, I mean, just social culture is constantly changing. I don't think the legal profession is as far behind as people like to categorize it as the old sleepy cobweb-ridden old mahogany desk sort of world is not really there anymore.
'Cause it still gets a lot of bad press, the legal sector, compared to that of other sectors. It still seems to be in the industry press. They still seem to get bad press, the legal sector in particular.
hmm Um, I suppose. I don't know.
Okay. And what's next for Keystone Law and you and Keystone?
Well, on we sort of yeah we just it's a wonderful opportunity. It's a huge market. Um, I set out with ambition for this firm to make it into something really special, and it is really special. But and it's not all about size, but I suppose it's a bit like having a child or something. You want it to be, you want to make it, allow it to become, achieve its potential, to be all it can be. Just and so we have been one of the fastest growing law firms for many years. I mean, as in top five in the country. Um, and it is such a we sort of set out to create something that had integrity and that was had transparency and had fairness. And we've done, that's what the DNA of the business is. And to see it do so much better than a lot of, well, to do very well as a result, as a direct result of those principles and beliefs, is very gratifying. And I suppose why do we always strive for growth and size? Big means better. Well, it doesn't always, but in this particular case, yes, I have to put my hand up. I have to admit, I'm ambitious. I like growing the firm. I know that if we just stopped growing the firm, then others would take us.
So you've
And
got this competitive mindset. You
I
want
guess
to
so.
be up there with the bigs.
I guess so. I guess so.
Okay,
It's fun.
not a bad ambition to have.
it's it's what everybody wants, that I work with in terms of things. Obviously, it's what our investors want, the shareholders. But I mean, as long as you retain the personality and the fun, and the happiness, and the reasons why people joined, and people. Others that join, they bring in work for the existing Keystone lawyers because there's a lot of cross referral of work, etc. And it's a happy place. And yeah, it's I don't as I don't really know what drives any of us, I suppose. But you do, but it is,
I suppose it changes. It
yeah.
changes. It's not one static thing. It sounds
No,
like
it's not.
it's kind of evolving and it's fluid and so on. That's really interesting, James. We're out of time now, but thank you for the insight.
Not at
Thank you
all.
for giving us your time. If there was one last bit of advice you would maybe give to someone that's struggling in business, they've got a business. What would it be? Lastly, on a closing note.
Just keep going.
Keep going. Fantastic. You heard that first on the Career Success podcast. That's James Knight. If you would like to find out more about James or Keystone Law, you can go online, check them out, Google Keystone Law. That's it for this episode of the Career Success podcast. That was James Knight, and I'm Jason Connolly. Thanks very much for joining us.